Welcome to Feminine Roadmap Podcast. I'm your host, Gina Farrar. Each week, I bring you an inspiring conversation to help you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife so that you can not only survive, but thrive in your second half. Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. It is Gina here, and this week, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Today with me, I have Dr. Ken-Druck, and Dr. Ken had this fantastic idea, so I'm going to welcome him and have him explain what it is we're going to be doing on our show today. Welcome, Dr. Ken.
Thank you so much, Gina, and thank you for your trust. You know, you and I taped a podcast, a couple of weeks ago, and it was our second program together. And I have just been having such a good time getting to know you. And I made a request of you. I thought, my God, if I'm having this good a time talking with you and getting to know you, wouldn't it be great for all the people who've become part of the tribe, for your listeners, if I interviewed you? I mean, you're one of these people who does interviews and draws out the very best and the essence in your guests for your audience. But yet you have such a depth of experience and wisdom and knowledge that, that you, without very much ego at all, kind of gets quietly harvested during the course of your interviews with other people. But I thought, wouldn't it be great for your audience if I could interview you and just kind of get to know you today and find out a little bit more about Gina? Because the more I find out, the more richness there is to share. And it also helped me understand, where does this woman's passion come from? Where did her idea to connect with so many thousands of people on the Feminine Roadmap come from? Where does that originate in her heart and soul? What has she been through in this life that has given her so much wisdom and experience? And what have been her biggest challenges? And what does she experience as the opportunity ahead of her work, the Feminine Roadmap, and her life, and so on? So all those questions were bursting in me. And I thought, let's create an opportunity to ask them and get out of the way and let her answer. So that's my first, is trying to get to know you and more about your journey. And if I were walked into the workshop, I used to give workshops where I would put a name tag on people. So it would say Gina, and underneath your name, it would have one word. And that one word would be, in order for you to get to know me, ask me about this. Now, my name tag would have my daughter Jenna's name on it. And you know enough about my story to know that my daughter died at age 21. And it's a defining moment in my life. And if you're going to get to know me, you need to ask me about Jenna. What would that be on your name tag? What word or color or symbol or story or person would be on your name tag to get to know you?
That is a great question.
And I invite all your listeners to think about what it would be for them too. If you're in my workshop and you had to put something down underneath your name for people to ask you about, what would it be? So what is it for you?
I think about all my life experiences and how it has driven me to be highly, highly intentional.
Beautiful. So ask me about intention, my evolving intention, or my intention. Would that be the word?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Uh-huh.
My drive to be intentional, maybe. With that. Yeah.
Drive to be intentional would be the words.
Okay.
And if I asked you about that and I said, Gina, give me an example about something that has happened in your life experience. I mean, I'd love to hear the once upon a time. I'd kind of like to say, all right, tell me about your life. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Gina. what happened from that point on? Maybe we start there and we go towards, how you formed intention out of your life experience. So once
Well,
upon a time.
once upon a time, yes, I was born to a teenage mom, and we had a very rough beginning.
Yes.
My mom was alone when I was born. She did marry, my father walked away, and then she married an alcoholic, and we lived in a violent home for my formative years, and then we fled. And that led to a lot of decisions and a lot of change, a lot of moving, a lot of, back and forth from my grandparents' house to other places. And all of that, it felt probably chaotic as I look back on it. My mom always had a job. My mom always worked very hard to provide. It wasn't a lack on her part of showing up in the best way she knew how. It was the way that as a child, all of the circumstances came together. So there was a lot of frustration and anger on the adults' part in my life, and I'm an only child, so I grew up around adults. So I always kind of had this separation between myself and children. It's like I was thinking on a different level. I didn't quite relate sometimes, and believe it or not, I was a sit back and observe. I'm a total extrovert, but as a child, because of everything that had happened, I kind of would sit back and watch. And so I would get in trouble for talking in class, but kids weren't very nice sometimes on the playground, which I'm sure happens to everybody. But from my world, there was a loneliness and a disconnectedness and a trying to cope with everything that was going on in my life at such a young age. I remember thinking how I would like it to be.
Yes.
And so,
where were you when you would think those things? Was there a tree? Was it lying in bed? Was it? Because I'm trying to picture the once upon a time, this little, the younger version, the child version of Gina, beginning to visualize, imagine how things might get better, what might happen that could take her out of this disconnection and out of this chaos.
Well, one of the things that it did, and it was an ongoing thing, was I was always trying to stabilize my environment. And so from a very young age, I was constantly trying to figure out how to make everything okay. So I've explained it this way. I'm kind of like a cruise ship. The stabilizers that go out on the water and they try to keep the ship from rocking. I feel like I'm a human stabilizer. Now, while that's not that bad of a quality, it can be. It can create dysfunction because in every relationship, I would find myself trying to stabilize and fix and constantly do all these things. So as I realized growing up, like in high school, people would say, you were the best friend. You listened so well. I go back to reunions and people were so happy to see me. And I realized my emotion was totally different than theirs. And it's, I think, because I had emotionally disconnected, but I was intentionally showing up for these people and requiring nothing in return. Because my life experience had taught me that there's nothing in return.
There's no reciprocity.
No, for different reasons. And I don't think that was intentional, to use my own word. I think it was just the circumstances of life were so overwhelming for the adults in my life. And because I was more of a quiet, obedient child, it was like I wasn't being a squeaky wheel. So they must have figured she's good. She doesn't go out and smoke and drink and disappear. She does what she's supposed to do. My mom has said I was the most obedient, easy child. And so for me, that was my stabilizing. I'm going to be good and sweet and, and that's what I thought would fix everything. But unfortunately, I shut myself down in the process.
I would imagine that a lot of your listeners are sitting there thinking about, what did I need to do to survive in my family? Was I the stabilizer? Was I the class clown? Was I the hero and the star athlete, or the beauty queen? Or what was I trying to save my mother or my father or my family from? How did I internalize that role for myself? And what did it cost me as I ventured out into the world to to find my place in the world, did I overutilize the caregiving part of me or the stabilizer part of me, as you're explaining right now? So at what point and through what experiences was there a harsh discovery, like, my God, I'm dating now, or I'm making friends in high school now, or whatever it is, I'm giving a disproportionate amount to this relationship, and it needs to go in both ways, needs to be give and take, it needs more balance. Where was the first point of correction where you realized that it would become dysfunctional for you to enroll for the rest of your life in the stabilizer role? And yet you could use the gifts, talents, skills, sensitivities that you had developed in a functional and concrete and in a positive way.
So I wish the journey was that straightforward. So what happened was I misunderstood my value, and I thought that I had learned in different situations that my value was really tied up in whether or not a guy liked me. And I had learned that from people around me. And so I spent a lot of time feeling less than. I really connected with a lot of people who were like the loners or lonely. And I really, in high school, wanted to make sure that this is where the intention came in. When I hit high school, my first year I was on drill team, and then I was in cheerleading my last 3 years. And I thought, okay, so there's this thing with cheerleading. Everybody thinks, ooh, cheerleader, popular, and they kind of put you in a separate kind of place. And so for me, I thought, I don't want to be stereotypical. I want to take whatever platform you consider cheerleading to be, and I want it to be a platform to reach out and be nice. I wanted people to felt seen. And although I didn't feel that I was special, I thought that the cheerleading platform made them think I was special. So I was coming at it from, well, I'm wearing a uniform. People have opinions about cheerleaders that they're not nice, they're stuck up, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, no, I'm intentionally going to disprove that stereotype. And I really enjoyed talking to people that maybe other popular kids, if you want to put it that way, wouldn't talk to. So I had a lot of diverse conversations and relationships because I genuinely care about people. And those people that get kind of lost in the shuffle, which I felt I definitely did, not intentionally, but again, life circumstances. And when you're a quiet, obedient child, you get kind of like, you're just kind of part of the furniture, right? And that loneliness and that feeling of not being seen and heard the way I felt that I needed to be seen and heard, I wanted to pay that forward to someone. That's the wrong way to put it, but
maybe if I do this, somebody will not have to go through what I've gone through.
Exactly. And that's been my driving intention for a very long time.
Yeah.
So how do I take my pain and identify it in someone else and give them, it was nothing. It was just a smile, saying hello to them in the hallway, kind of forcing them to look at me and say hi back, because they weren't used to it. And so, I had that reputation in high school of just being really nice. In my yearbook, people sign your yearbook. It was like, to a really nice girl, you're such a nice girl, or sweet, or whatever. It's like I'm a piece of candy. But what's funny about that, and that was where I wanted to go, is I was emotionally disconnected. So I cared about other people, but I didn't necessarily ever require anything back. So there was this continued emptiness and lack of value happening on my side. And then after I graduated high school, all the anger from stuffing my emotions all my life came out. And then that started a whole journey of just having to realize, man, this anger is destructive. And when I dated my husband, my now husband, I broke up with him 4 times. One time was, I won't go into that story. That was,
I call those emotional divorces within a marriage. Sometimes we go, what we don't realize is we've gone through an emotional divorce in the context of our 20-year or 15 or 30-year marriage. and they're natural and they're normal. And so you're saying when you went through one of those,
I went through them because I was terrified. I didn't feel worthy, valuable. He was very easygoing, just very easy in the way that he related to me, very calm, completely opposite of me. And so things would be going great, and then I would just break up with him because it would freak me out. The last time I did that, we got back when we were talking about getting back together. My husband, who was at that point especially really far from ultimatums, gave me an ultimatum. He said, look, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this one way or the other, but it's forever. It's forever together, forever apart. You choose.
Wow.
I know. I really taxed my husband's patience, and tell me, he's got a lot of patience. So obviously I had an overwhelming fear fight, and I won the fight. I married my husband, but then changing from being in environments that I knew to a new environment when I got married and I moved in with him, I didn't realize that it was going to cause an emotional earthquake. And I found myself feeling angry for no reason. And that set off a journey of dealing with my anger and knowing, here's the answer, knowing that the anger that I knew in the home, because the adults were frustrated. I had a grandpa my grandma was handicapped. He was taking care of her. We were moving in and out of their house, so he was helping us. I had an uncle that was moving in and out of the motorhome. So my grandfather was basically caregiving or providing for or rescuing or whatever word you want to give to all these people. And then
probably
there's
doing
me.
all of those things, including enabling. Yeah.
And then there's me, the little one. And so you got to watch little ones, you got to make sure they have to get where they get because they don't drive. And so there was a lot going on. And so there was a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And I remember thinking, I don't want my home to feel like that. I want there to be peace in the walls of my home. But then I got married and I was bringing it right into the home that there was no reason. Again, I wasn't married to someone who would even argue with me. Like if I tried to start fights, he would just not do it. And then I'd get more mad, So I realized I had a problem. And that's when that intention of, okay, Gina, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Because clearly you're the problem. Clearly this is what you've learned. You stuffed your emotions for 18 years. Then it came out like a jack in the box, a really ticked off jack in the box. And now you're married. And then I got pregnant 20 days after I got married.
As you're getting to this point of the story, I think about if there was one lasting concept that Freud gave us, it was the idea of repetition compulsion, that we unconsciously and unknowingly, when we get married, we unknowingly reconstruct our family of origin, hoping for healing, hoping that somebody's going to give us what we didn't get, trying to meet the unmet needs of our childhood. And we're in chaos. We don't know whether we're coming or going. Our partner doesn't know what the hell's going on, what we're trying to reconstruct for what purpose. But how many of us, like you are so beautifully and articulately sharing, awaken, we've actually created a good situation for ourselves. We've made a good choice of a partner or a job or health practices or lifestyle. And yet we get in there and there are parts of us acting out, creating
Screwing
drama,
screwing it up,
self-sabotaging, or trying to twist it into or use it as a testing ground for whether or not we're going to get our needs met, whether there's hope, whether there's despair. It's awakening that whole drama that we have lived through, and we don't even realize what we're doing until we wake up. So it sounds like slowly you began to wake up and say, my God, what am I doing? Why have I imposed my childhood situation, some of my deepest needs and wounds? Why have I imposed that on this poor man And this marriage, which is, this new marriage, why am I doing that? And am I setting myself up for failure to show that it doesn't work? I should go back to what I was doing, leave, do my solo act, be a victim, whatever, or do I venture forward? And he was putting that choice squarely in your lap, like, let's either do this or whatever it is that we're doing, let's decide that we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way of looking at it?
I think yes. But what's interesting is back to that word on my name tag, the proverbial name tag, living a life of intention. I'm a bit of a bulldog when I get my mind on something. And so I was not going to repeat history. I was not going to go down that path. I just really had no idea how to fix it. So basically we had our first daughter when we were married 10 months and 5 days. Like, it was so fast. And so now I got married. Within the first month I get pregnant. Before my first year I have a baby, and I'm still completely handicapped emotionally in the way to handle stuff that most people handle without thinking. So my intentionality came with, I knew that something was not right, and I knew that I was repeating history, and I was mad that I was repeating history, and then I was mad also. So I was mad as a person because I had emotional baggage up the wazoo, and then I was mad that it kept coming back, and there was no reason. Like, I could logically go, why are you feeling, why?
In that moment, because I would imagine that we have people listening who are in a chaos that they don't have words to describe it. They are just unhappy. Something is not right. Mm-hmm. Something is off the rails, and they're afraid that their life is going to go off the rails. Either they're going to sabotage a job that they love, or a marriage that's good, a relationship, a friendship that's important. Perhaps it's an issue with their parents that's getting acted out as their parents get older. Who knows what it is? Maybe it's their health, but something is going off the rails, and they're not even grasping, or they're addressing it with self-criticism instead of self-compassion. Mm-hmm. And the way to awareness, and you and I have talked about this before, the path to the greatest awareness is not through admonition, that waving finger of admonition and blame and criticism that we put in our own faces, our foot on our own throats. It's through patience and kindness and understanding of trying to sort through what we're feeling and make sense of it. That, of course, I'm feeling this way. How could I not feel this way after what I've been through? How could I not be struggling to try to write new, different kind of chapters in my life? So that voice of self-compassion, how did that show up in your life? Because I know you speak about that a lot. How did self-compassion show up? Or was there a major war going on between self-compassion and harsh self-criticism?
I think I was firmly planted in harsh self-criticism at that time. And this is not to say, and I do feel like I want to say this, our parents, and you and I have talked about this, they do the best with what they have, with what they know. And there were a lot of things I probably don't know about, but without throwing my mom or my grandparents under the bus, there were still impacts on me. And so grace was something that I didn't grow up with. And so that word specifically became the word that I pursued. So again,
it became on your name tag too.
Grace and intention. And it didn't come easy at all, because it's much easier for me to be very like, that's wrong. Judgment is easier for me. And so I met a woman at a women's conference, a women's retreat, and I hunted her for the weekend. Literally, no joke. I thought, she's the one, and she didn't know me. And I pestered her the whole weekend till she said yes to me. And then we began to meet. We met weekly at first with my kids. I would meet her at her house, and she would just disciple me. And she was a lay woman. She was married to a pastor, but she was a lay woman who just had a very sweet, gentle spirit. She had her own difficult story, which I didn't know until we got to know each other. And that's how the story of grace, the ability to, you know, I don't feel like doing it. I didn't ask you if you felt like doing it. Like, she was gently firm with me, but very gracious. And so we met a lot, like weekly at the beginning, but over 7 years. This started when I was 25, 26.
What a blessing to have a mentor, a teacher, a confidant that was trustworthy, to be able to help, to listen and help you sort this out. And I imagine, people are listening going, do I have that in my life? Am I being invited to make a decision to pursue somebody like that in my life? Is it okay? Is it a sign of weakness? Can it make such a difference in my life if I have one person I can trust, who I can share my journey with? Because for you, it sounds like, we'd put that on the gift list of, oh my God, if I were taking inventory of the gifts in my life, this woman and the grace that she taught me is on my gift list. She's right up there near the top.
Well, she,
along with a husband who said, okay, I love you. I want to be with you for the rest of my life.
But get it together, woman.
Yeah. And that is a loving man. My God. What a wonderful man.
Well, here's the thing. Everyone benefited from my time with Bonnie. And I was very intentional about that relationship. And she returned in kind, and that was new for me. She invested, and I had to learn to receive. And so,
Wow.
like you said, the last time we talked
Wow.
about our receiver being broken, I definitely had a broken receiver. I'm not even sure I had a receiver. I may have had to order out and get one.
I think you definitely went on Amazon Prime looking for a receiver.
Yeah.
And I think you developed one, and that capacity in the relationship with Bonnie, in the relationship with your husband. So surrounding yourself with people, your chooser was working. You were choosing good people. Sometimes our choosers are the things that are broken. Mm-hmm. We keep bringing people into our lives to create a positive result, to meet the unmet needs of our childhood, but they're the wrong people. All they're going to do is help us reconstruct the drama where we feel alone and unloved, or we question how lovable we are. And I
did that once. I definitely did that.
Me too.
I call it my stupid summer.
Yep.
We actually named it. We all know what it is. My husband knows exactly what it is, because it's like, where the intention came in as I grew in grace. Really painful story, actually. My youngest daughter, I wasn't able to cope with things like spilt milk. I'm not even kidding. Like, no capacity to cope, because I had stuffed my feelings to be the stabilizer, and there wasn't time in the adults. The adults in my life loved me, but they couldn't hold space for how I felt. And because I was a good child, if I ever needed to express myself and it came out wrong, because you're a child, I would get in trouble. So I learned not to express myself. But of course, that's self-damaging. And so coming to the reality that this is not being, not holding the people around me as responsible, my own personal responsibility of how am I going to make it different for my family. Not like I'm better than you, but I don't want to do that anymore. So I couldn't cope with things like spilled milk.
Because it was evidence. It was evidence that you weren't succeeding, that you were just becoming your mother, or just becoming the family that you were trying not to become.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I would lose my temper when she would spill her milk. And as I grew in grace, definitely grace, and I intentionally pursued figuring out what that even looked like, my youngest daughter actually remembers the day I didn't get mad at her.
Oh my God.
And that's I cry every time. But
That was a moment where everything changed. It's like, Mom, what did she say to you?
She
Can
just
you
says, I
remember?
remember you didn't yell at me that day. And I said, I was trying to get there sooner, but no matter how hard I ran intentionally at change and grace, it was elusive for a long time.
You know, I can think on the list of the greatest gifts that we give our kids. I think about an apology that I made to my daughters. And you're reminding me of it. One of the most profound, transformative moments in my daughter's life was the time that I apologized to them because things had not been going well with me and their mother. And I leaned on my daughters heavily. My emotional needs were met going to their soccer games, and I was so embroiled in their lives, but disproportionately because there was an emptiness in my relationship with my wife at the time. And I apologized to them. And I said, I can't speak for how it affected you to have a dad who was perhaps overly involved and not enough of an example of a man who was effectively involved with his wife and balanced that out with his relationship with his kids. I said, I don't know how it affected you, but I'm sorry. I didn't know how to forge to that gap and that distance and that emptiness that had grown in my relationship with your mother. But I want to apologize. And it was one of the most meaningful things that's ever happened in my relationship with them. So I'm so deeply touched by what you shared with your daughter.
What's interesting is sometimes I'll run into a young mother, or I just find myself really encouraging them to be honest with their children. And that was part of my parenting journey, was I didn't have communication or the ability to communicate honestly, because the adults in my life couldn't cope with helping me navigate because they were struggling to navigate their own lives. So it wasn't that they didn't love me, they just didn't have the capacity. And so I had this huge desire for a certain kind of family and a certain kind of expression of that love in my home, and peace. Peace was very important to me. And so one of the things I instituted very early on, because it's something that never happened for me, was the adult in my life saying, I really screwed that up, I'm sorry. So if you were to talk to my children, really, they would tell you that I apologized a lot. And it it was all necessary. And
Did I put a third word on your name tag? Humility. Ask me about the role humility has played in my life.
It has been a humbling journey. And I think if I were to jump forward to the kind of home, the relationship my girls have with each other, the relationship that I've helped my husband nurture with them, because he also came from an emotionally disconnected home and struggled with knowing how to connect. When they were little, he didn't have a problem, but as they grew up, he pulled away and they knew it. And it was just his own lack of confidence and not knowing how to navigate it. And I think it's harder for men sometimes to tap into those things. So we've navigated that as a family, and now we have a home that I say, there's peace in the walls. And one of my prayers, literally the whole time my kids grew up, was that God would redeem the years the locusts had eaten, because I was not who I wanted to be when I got married or had a baby, and that was all in the same year. So I felt like I had to run so hard to change, and the change didn't come in the speed nothing comes in the speed that I like it to come, but it definitely didn't come in the speed that I wanted it to come. So that intention and that drive to just try to shorten that, what I would call ugliness, and try to get to the grace, the peace, the love, the unconditional. And we got there, That's why people say, oh, I wish I could go back to my 20s. I'm like, no, thank you. My 20s were like hell and high water. No, thank you. Because it was of what I was personally going through. My husband, of course, was very patient, but it leads to why I started Feminine Roadmap. because I found in my life that having those real conversations and talking about the elephant under the rug, to me, matters. I no longer want to just survive and ignore, because it only makes it worse. And so I've been a little bit of a pot stirrer, not like intentionally, but when you bring up problems, people don't like it. A lot of people are not willing. My poor husband's family, I think I was like the biggest shock of their world, because I'm the only one of the 3 daughter-in-laws who will be like, hello, can we talk about this? And everybody else is like, what? Talk about what? So Feminine Roadmap is essentially my opportunity to talk about the elephant under the rug. That's basically it. And I thought, I cannot be the only one that's wondering or struggling or pondering. So all of those years of how I wanted my family to be and who I felt I needed to become, because that's really what it came down to. Personal responsibility. I had to be the change I wanted to see. And when I say I had no clue, I kid you not. I had no clue how that was going to work. None. I just knew this was not okay. And so I feel like you talked about difficulty in marriage. Clearly, I wasn't making it easy on my marriage. But I married someone, and this is a little side note. Another intentional thing that I did was I chose a man who was not violent, who was not angry, and who I knew would never intentionally harm me. That was, if a man even came, and I had an issue with men, which you can imagine, a little bit of a problem. So he didn't hit any of the things that I was resistant to. He was the complete opposite. Now, I would say he was like my grandpa, believe it or not. I had thought about that later in years, just that my grandpa did everything for my grandmother. He bathed her. My grandfather actually created, she had MS. So by the time I was in early elementary, she was wheelchair bound completely. And he created and sewed dresses that went on the front of her like an apron and tied in the back so that she could have pretty dresses, but that he could dress her easily, because putting it over her head didn't work. She was dead weight, so it was too difficult. That's the kind of man my grandfather was. And I essentially married someone who supports me no matter what I want to do. You know, he's not perfect, but I'll tell you what, he has put up with more crap than I would have because of the person I was. Like, I would have had, there's one guy, he's like, whatever happened? I said, dude, if we had gotten married, it would have been World War III. It would never have worked. Because you would have said, you know, women don't do that. And I would have been like, punch you in the nose, and it would have been over, you know? So my intention to marry someone who was kind, gentle, loving, not angry, didn't raise his voice, literally doesn't raise his voice. He has this quiet stubbornness. He's not, we both have our pros and our cons, but that intentionality led me to think, you know what? I think we need to have these conversations. And there's people out there who aren't famous. They're hustling their message. You've done really, really well. I've had a handful of people like yourself, Tom Ziegler. I can only think for initials, but there's women. She was like part of the White House with Clinton, and like I've had amazing people, but then I've had other people who just lived a quiet journey and have so much wisdom and insight to share. So I intentionally try to find those people that I can take what my platform is and amplify their message, expecting that someone needs to hear it. I just don't know who, and I don't know when.
You have become the convener of conversations. What you've described so beautifully is the anatomy and the alchemy of how our mission is born of our deepest wounds and needs, and how you have turned the gifts of what it took for you to survive into a gift for the whole world. That's what a mission is. When our deepest need, born of our deepest wounds, has been met for us, and then we meet it for the rest of the world. Because we are living in a world, as you've explained, that is in such desperate need of convening conversations and of overcoming the fear and the awkwardness and the anger that inhibits the connection that we all need to live together. And you've described that so beautifully. And I love, the language, Gina, that you've shared. You by the way, you didn't know this about me, but I'm the titler. You know how in certain movies there's the Joker and I'm the titler. Over the years, I've helped title many of my friends' best-selling books. And it's out of the fabric of their own journey. So out of the fabric of your journey is the title of your new best-selling book. Can I tell you what the title is?
Yes.
Okay. The title of your book is called Peace in the Walls. And I want, if all of your listeners agree with me that that's the title of your new book, of how we create that through convening the conversations in our lives, please tell Gina that you agree that that should be the title of her upcoming book, because you have so much to teach and so much to share and so much to say. I'm interested in what is the next iteration of the Feminine Roadmap? You have grown and your work is growing and soaring into the world and being shared. And what is your aspiration for what this becomes in the world, the convening of these conversations? How does this grow in a way that makes your heart sing and that warms your heart?
I think the next iteration, the vision that I have, is that it would truly be a tribe, not in that kind of social media like, oh, this is my tribe, but like legitimately women lives are impacted. They're impacted and changed because of the intersection of their lives with the Feminine Roadmap podcast. And I now have it on YouTube. And the thing about that is, what started the YouTube, the expansion from the podcast adding the YouTube, was sometimes people's stories would come across my email and I thought, oh, I would love to talk to this person, but it doesn't really make sense. And I try to stay on mission with my podcast and keep it in the context of what's going to help a woman in midlife navigate, because it's a very challenging season of life. So I thought, well, I'll just start a YouTube and talk to these people and let them tell their stories. That's literally all I do. I just let them tell their stories. But then there's someone like you that comes along and I think, oh, we should do a video on unresolutions. Okay, so there's this health and wellness kind of lifestyle thing, and then there's this inspirational story thing. So I have 2 playlists, and I'm hoping to grow that, because I think for some people like myself, I love audio, but I also love video. Sometimes I like to see the person I'm listening to. So the next iteration is for that to grow, for people to begin to engage, comment, let me know they're out there breathing and not saying, oh, Gina, you're amazing. Thank you for all you do. Although that's nice. I mean, you're welcome to say thank you, but I want to know that Dr. Ken or Dr. Carla or Stephanie Thompson made an impact in your life, that something they did, something they shared, that their life and their message made a difference. And so I want it to be a vibrant, living organism, not just a consumption piece. That's my next iteration. And of course, unfortunately, I can invite people, but they have to say yes to me. And so I'm building a platform that's a membership group called the Feminine Roadmap Academy. Academy is kind of a big word, but it's easy for me to use. But basically, it's a membership group for women where they can come and feel seen and heard. All, again, back to the things that I felt I didn't have. It's my way of creating a platform to meet the needs that the younger me needed and couldn't find, so that it's not a judgmental place. It's a place of, yeah, this is where you will find grace and support, and we will hear. You can't just complain. We need to find the solution, because the goal is to move forward. So Feminine Roadmap, in my mind, is a vehicle to navigate or to facilitate women to grow into the women that they're intended to be. It's a resource that they can tap into, not just listen to, not just watch, but the Feminine Roadmap Academy is that next, like, no, you're going to come and be a part of something that I'm creating for you with content that will build you up and help you understand your value, your purpose, and help you get past those things. And then each month there will be a live conversation so we can interact. But I want that living organism to be a part of what I do. I actually got my very first fan mail in October, and it's a gal in Chicago. She reached out to me. She sent me the most lovely email, and I was away at an event with my oldest daughter, and I cried. We were in our room, and I read it, and I couldn't even read it to her. I just started to cry, and it was like one person has said, this makes a difference. And then I have one friend who's a lot younger. This gal's my age. I have a friend I used to work with. I had no idea how young she was. She's like in her early 30s. And she listens to my podcast. She shares my podcast. She promotes my podcast. And she brings other young women along to listen to these things. They're technically for, geared at midlife, but she finds that these principles and stories are helping her prepare for the journey that she's on. And I want to know that it's making a difference, not so that I can say I did it, but so that I'm so intentional that it's hard to do something without knowing that it matters, if that makes any sense.
I love what you're sharing, and I love your vision. And as you were speaking, I was just imagining so many women encouraging, paying it forward, being so glad that they listened and they took action. They did something as a result of the inspiration and the guidance they got, and they took action, and it had a great result in their marriage, in their friendships, in the way that they're looking at their own lives and the changes that they're going through, and the transitions that have presented, and that they're paying it forward and saying, you've got to listen. You've got to listen. So the library of resources you're creating is such a gift to the world. And I just want to acknowledge you. The reason I'm here today doing this is because I am 1,000% behind. I think your gift and what you're doing can be impacting, millions of women who are in such desperate need of gaining the encouragement and the confidence and the skills and the guidance to have conversations, to speak their hearts, speak their minds, stand their ground, and to make their life the highest expression of what it can be. And that's who you are. That's what you're doing. And I'm 100% behind you, with you. And I loved, again, having the opportunity for us to talk.
I appreciate that. Some of the conversations, Dr. Ken, like the aging parent conversation you and I had, that was February 6th. That's the podcast, episode 132. That's because born out of the fact that I'm in the middle of caregiving for two moms. I had another discussion with a woman about abuse because I grew up in my formative years in an abusive home. And I had an uncle who was verbally and emotionally abusive to my mom and consequently to me throughout the years of my growing up. And I feel like I don't just want to have fluffy conversations. I want to make sure that we're talking about the things. Like I said, I'm an elephant under the rug person. I don't want to pretend it's not there. Not ultimately. I think there's always moments where you're like, I don't want to deal with that. But if there's one woman out there, Ken, just one, that hears that message and breaks the chain of abuse.
Yes.
Or breaks the chain of addiction, because I've had that conversation too. Or takes her grief journey and makes a difference in her world. Not because I'm so great, but because I have the blessing of Feminine Roadmap to create a platform where other people who have skills and resources I don't yet have, or I may never have because it doesn't apply, if you will. This is a community effort to build a resource, like you said. That is my mission. I've shared it with everyone that I talk with. I have two purposes for Feminine Roadmap. One is that Feminine Roadmap is to help women navigate the challenges and changes of midlife. It's a resource for them. If they are younger, of course these resources will help them navigate challenges. It's just, I'm midlife, so I'm talking at that angle, if you will. But if somebody 30 gets it, great. That's awesome. They're not excluded. The second prong of my goal is to be a vehicle for other people to magnify their messages that I believe need to be heard. Whatever level of fame I do or don't have, if we can reach one woman, we've done our job. But they need a place to talk, and every platform has its audience. So I invite people onto my platform so that we can impact people together, because me talking alone all the time is very limited. I need to create that community with other people so that the message is greater, it's wiser, it's broader, it's necessary that other people join me in this mission, because I cannot do it alone. It takes a village to build a tribe. And so that's what Feminine Roadmap is all about, is I love to bring people up. I love to raise them up. I love to give them the sense as best I can that their message, their person is important in the world. It's like a big puzzle, right? And everybody is a piece. And if we just connect with people, the picture becomes clearer. And it's so important right now. We talked about this right before we hit record. Our country, United States, we're talking about a lot of discord and a lot of dysfunction. So what can I control, Ken? I can only do what I can do in my sphere, in my home first, my family, my friends, and Feminine Roadmap is my way of having an impact on whatever world it reaches. And I do reach a lot of countries. I know at one point, like over 120 countries. And so that might be one woman in some random country I didn't even know existed has listened to this podcast. Your voice, my voice, one of my other guests. That's the point. That's what Feminine Roadmap is about. It's about impact. It's that back to that intention and that grace. I know people are struggling, and I have struggled, and I know what it is to be lonely, and I know what it is to feel less than, and I know what it is to hate how I look, and wish differently, and then just coming to that state of grace and realizing, okay, what can I do? Asking for forgiveness was pretty much a daily thing, so no problem. I was well versed in that by the time I hit like 25, but this is a journey, Ken, that is hard. We don't have to go alone. I don't want anyone to feel like that, because I have felt like that. And that loneliness can overwhelm. So why not create something that invites people to be who they are, to face the reality of life, and come up with a few solutions that might make it easier to make it through until we get back on, life is like this, right? Up and down, up and down. And when someone's down, I just compelled to help pull them up. Even though I don't think I necessarily have all the answers, I'll share what I have, and then I'll try to point you to someone that maybe has a better answer than I do.
Well, I'm honored to be part of your community, and I count myself amongst the fortunate guys. I know it's a Feminine Roadmap. But,
I have a few guys.
But you know what? The benefit and the blessing, you know what the sexiest thing in the world to a man is? A woman who is growing more confident and comfortable in her own skin. There's nothing sexier. There's nothing more beautiful, more powerful. There's nothing that piques our curiosity more, that wants us to get closer. And so what you're doing in support of women and speaking to women's issues is rippling out into the community of men like me who, when Lisette goes out with her girlfriends and has a great evening because they all trusted each other and they had real conversations about what was going on in their lives. She comes home, and who's the beneficiary of this woman who's radiant,
yep,
who knows she's not alone? who understands so much more about herself through that peer education and support and that love that's exchanged between women. And it's the same thing when I go, and I've been in a men's group for 25 years, and I come home and she sees me radiant and feeling strong because there are men who I can trust who want to have real conversations about all the transitions that are occurring in our lives. And we're, whether we're 35 or 55 or 75. So this is the blessing. And peace in the walls is happening in our own hearts. It's happening in our friendships, in our families, in our communities, in our nations, and in the world, and in the universe beyond for those who want to get spiritual. And so that is my prayer and wish for you, is that you continue to create peace in the walls on all these different levels. And I thank you for allowing me to be part of it.
Thank you for being my guest host today. And I really have enjoyed the fact that we have this serendipitous crossing of our paths, and just how much we kind of fell into step as friends, and just really understanding each other and sharing our lives and sharing our platforms. I've been very blessed in the beginning of our friendship and what I imagine is going to be years of just a really great friendship and relationship.
I'm so looking forward, Gina. Thank you again.
My pleasure. So today, friends, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Ken, and he just thought it would be a fun idea to turn the tables and let me be the one sharing my heart. So friends, if you head over to www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 143, you will find this show. You will find show notes, any resources that Dr. Ken and I have come up with, which will be our podcast, our conversations, his website, and my Feminine Roadmap Academy link as well. So friends, please remember that everything that you experience in your life has value. There's always beauty in the ashes. There's always something to be gained from our losses. If we look for it, there's always some kind of nugget. Diamonds are created under pressure. And you and I, my friends, are just diamonds in the rough. And if we lean into the process of living, we really can come out as a shiny, beautiful, precious diamond. We're just slowly dusting off the coal, the things that kind of hide that shine. And I hope the Feminine Roadmap is an encouragement to you. And if it is, please let me know. Please share it with a friend. Please join my tribe when you're at my website. Follow me on Instagram at Feminine Roadmap. Let's build this community. Let's link arms, because something that I want to do, I can't do alone. We must do it in community, my friends. And I appreciate any time that you give to listen and share. It's such a blessing. Thank you so much, my friends. We look forward to having more inspiring and empowering conversations as the years go by. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.